Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 21st of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, no matter what part of Alaska you're watching from tonight. Thank you, welcome, and we encourage you to keep this number handy. 1-800-472-0391 is one of the easiest ways you can stay up to date with your local weather forecast. If you're on St. Lawrence Island, the number's 123, pretty easy there. Keep the numbers that you hear handy, so once you get your special code when you're calling into this number, you'll hear what I mean. Write that down, and you don't have to wait for the voice prompts anymore. You can just dial your number like they do in St. Lawrence Island and get your forecast lickety-split. Weather.gov/Alaska is the easy way to find us online. Of course, we have social media that can share additional parts of the weather story with you on your phone or your mobile device, or even on your PC or Mac. Simply go to facebook.com, and at the top of the search bar, if you type in NWS Alaska or NWS Fairbanks, NWS Juneau, NWS Anchorage, any one of those options there will get you part of your weather story. You can always just localize it or get all 4 channels there on Facebook. Twitter's the same way, same addresses, same way to get information. Very easy to set that up on your phone as well. And make sure that you're looking for more information about breakup in the coming weeks too. We'll have more news from our Alaska Pacific River forecasters about Alaska weather breakup as we get into the rest of spring. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is an easy way to find me. Send me an email sometime. I'd love to see a picture of how it looks in your part of the world. Let's take a look at what's going on across Alaska tonight. Generally, it is going to be a windy situation across the North Slope and the West Coast, and a very wet and soggy and slushy situation across South Central and parts of the Gulf Coast. We're going to start up north. Areas in red now are blizzard warnings, and we expect to see generally a ground blizzard, a wind over snow that's already fallen, no additional snow for the North Slope as we go from this point onward all the way until at least Saturday morning, and probably Saturday afternoon and evening for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. So let's start out west here in the Bering Strait. Winter weather advisory is posted for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait until 6 o'clock tomorrow night for Friday. We are expecting additional snow in this area, about 1 to 3 inches. A few places could see as much as 5, but gusts to 55 miles per hour are really going to be a big part of the problem, and visibility could drop down to about a half mile at times, making travel kind of tricky. So make sure you're being careful in that situation there. That'll go until Friday afternoon, early evening before things start to improve around the Bering Strait communities and St. Lawrence Island. A winter weather advisory for you. Now, traveling up the coast to the western Arctic coast between Point Hope and a little past Wainwright, we're expecting blizzard conditions there. And again, this is going to be that ground blizzard. No additional snow for this, just poor visibility because of the snow blowing around and dropping visibility below 1/4 mile. That's going to continue for a while. So from tonight all the way through, as we get into Saturday morning, pretty early, around midnight, we expect to see conditions there pretty poor, thanks to gusts up to about 50 to 55 miles per hour. Now, as we get a little bit further eastward, a winter weather advisory is posted for areas around AKwx, southward toward AKwx. We don't expect conditions to be nearly as bad here as we do on either side. So this is an advisory, a lesser alert, a warning on either side of you. That's the highest alert we have. So conditions there might bring visibility down to a half mile at times. That'll probably improve sometime after midnight, early Saturday morning. So very late Friday night and early Saturday before that gets better. And then east, we expect conditions to be a lot slower to improve. Blizzard warnings now in effect for Prudhoe Bay, Deadhorse, east toward Kaktovik, and everywhere in between. That'll go until Saturday night, around 6 o'clock. Gusts there also upwards around 50 to 55 miles per hour at the worst. But those are blizzard warnings, and that means visibility could be below 1/4 mile. But it is a ground blizzard. We're not adding any additional snow on top of the already snowy picture that you have there. So do be careful if you're on the North Slope. Pretty much looks like poor visibility and driving winds for the majority of the weekend. As we look a little bit further south and west out towards St. Paul and St. George, you have a winter weather advisory now. That was a watch. It has just been upgraded. We expect to see that change to about 2 to 4 inches of snow. Some stronger gusts coming through, and with that we do expect visibility to drop down to about a half mile during the daytime tomorrow. So plan for some Kind of gnarly conditions there for a little while, but the good news is a front's coming through. A little bit milder weather will sweep through, and it'll end the risk of heavier snowfall and wind. The wind may stay with you, but at least it will be a better chance that some of that will be wet rather than snowy. So a winter weather advisory now posted for you during the day on Friday as we go. Stay tuned for more information on that. As we look at the overall satellite picture across the region, you can see the monster low sitting out here across the western Gulf. Very beautiful picture on satellite, all swirled up like a cinnamon roll. And you can see that broad southerly flow working its way into the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, the Barren Islands, and Prince William Sound. Along this channel, if you were to follow this all the way down, it would end up somewhere in the northern Hawaiian Islands. It is an extensive front that has a lot of moisture trapped in front of it and is drawing all of that into Alaska. So the cloud cover continues to move in north. And so if you're thinking of Hawaii, that's probably why today. Now, some of this moisture is just grazing the outer coast of southeast and northern parts of southeast. Occasionally, you're seeing some rain move through, and that's really going to be the story for most of the week, it looks like. The rest of the week and into the weekend, you'll just get little pieces of this kind of moving through. So if you're in southern southeast and thinking, yes, this is going to push a tremendous amount of rain right where we need it over southern southeast, it doesn't really look like that right now. It looks like you'll get little chunks of this kind of breaking off and passing through, but maybe not a wall-to-wall washout there that could bring some really helpful moisture to your area. Instead, a lot of that is going to make its way into western parts of Prince William Sound. So from Whittier and Portage all the way southward, probably to Seward, there's an opportunity, especially at higher terrain above you, maybe not necessarily in town, that you're going to get a really big soaker out of this. Especially at sea level, it looks wet. At higher terrain, it looks sloppy, wet, snowy kind of weather. And that's raising the risk of avalanche concerns around the Kenai Mountains and certainly into the Chugach around Prince William Sound. So if you've got travel plans, you're going through known avalanche danger zones in your travels, whether that's backcountry on the road, it'd be a really good time to pay attention to the clues that are telling you that the situation could be changing. Now, at lower terrain, we're not expecting a whole lot of snow, so this shouldn't be a problem necessarily in town, but again, higher terrain, there's probably going to be some developing issues there as this very wet and snowy situation moves in. Across the west coast, you can see the streaks are kind of pointed more north-south, and there is northerly winds working down the west coast into the backside of this weather system. That's bringing colder air in, and that is also moving the ice edge further south. But we have about another day or so left of that southerly, or let's say from north to south movement, and increasing the ice edge before we bring in another southerly round of wind and starts chewing that ice edge north. So here we go. Low pressure map right now shows us the low is in the western Gulf, a front working through the eastern and northern Gulf there with periods of rain. Not too heavy so far today, it looks like, but that will gradually change. Another weak dying front here across the interior, and that's keeping snow falling across parts of Norton Sound, the Seward Peninsula, the Bering Strait, and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there. As we get into tonight, that front is going to fall apart, and it's really going to focus a lot of its moisture into Bristol Bay, Kodiak, probably the Barren Islands, and we've got 4 dots here over Prince William Sound. This is the beginning of that opportunity for heavier precipitation. Most of that rain at sea level, but up above, it's going to be that sloppy, wet snow as the freezing levels go up and up and up. So we are warming things up. Notice how southeast kind of gets out of that main channel of moisture there, so clouds, not a whole lot of rain. And then snow for the Brooks Range, and the crossed arrows indicate that blowing snow, poor visibility because of that, and again, blizzard warnings for many. A trough of low pressure will sit over the Bering Strait. That's going to help to draw in some of that air across the region and really crank up the winds, as we were talking about, gusts to 45, even 55 miles per hour there. Snow will fall across the Bering Strait. The worst conditions for St. Lawrence Island, again, will be during the daytime tomorrow. And really the same goes for the St. Paul and St. George region under a winter weather advisory now. So watch for snow during the day and poor visibility because of that. We still have 4 dots of rain across the Prince William Sound and eastern Kenai Peninsula area. Again, that's mainly that higher terrain. It's going to see the slushy, wet snow, and the lower terrain getting pounded with that very narrow channel of wet weather. Southeast, you'll probably see some light rain passing through the region on Friday. We'll look for mixed precipitation across the Bering seacoast areas of the Aleutians. And here comes that ice chewer upper, the one that's coming out of the west, is going to work its way quickly into the Bering Sea, ending the risk for snow and wind around the Pribilofs, and then giving another quick burst there on Saturday before warmer weather returns. And then up the west coast, you can see milder weather setting into places like Bethel, all the way down the southwest coast into Bristol Bay. And as that milder weather moves in, the risk for heavier snowfall across the west should diminish quickly. and you'll notice the wind starting to let up here across parts of the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Using the model that we use today to kind of paint the weather story, you'll notice it's really shifted those tight contours farther to the east. If that's the case, conditions will quickly improve for the north slope, but we think that that transition may be a lot slower. So be careful about jumping into quick improvements here across the Beaufort Seacoast. Right now, blizzard warnings are set to end at 6 p.m. on Saturday and not 6 a.m. So it looks like most of the day will be spent in poor visibility across the north slope there with those gusty winds. Meanwhile, it looks like there could be some additional rainfall in southeast, maybe some higher elevation snow. And once again, the precipitation trends around Prince William Sound and certainly the higher terrain there look like there will be an opportunity for more slushy and wet snow where you are. Friday morning temperatures across southeast, likely in the lower to mid 40s, still very mild. Same goes for south central, 30s and even lower 40s around Anchorage and into the valley. Temperatures around Fairbanks likely holding at or just below the freezing point there. You'll melt out again in the day. 13 around Fort Yukon, 3 in AKwx Pass. In the north slope, temps anywhere from 5 to 15 below. Kotzebue Sound temperatures about 5 to 10 above. 14 in Nome, 2 for Savunga. Mid to upper 30s for the southwest regions. Even McGrath goes above freezing there. Bristol Bay in the mid to upper 30s. Sandpoint about 38. Kodiak near 40. A high of 45 there on Friday afternoon. In south central, temps could easily warm into the upper 40s to near 50 degrees. Probably not record setting, but certainly pushing well above the norm. Southeast, lower to mid 50s. A very mild day again. Yakutat 49. Looks like Tanana, Ambler, Bettles, all in the 30s at least. AKwx Pass up to 28, Arctic Village 26, 1 below for Utqiagvik, and 5 above for Kaktovik. 31 in Nome, southwest 30s and 40s. On Alaska and Dutch Harbor closer to 40 degrees. Saturday morning temperatures are very mild as you see, 20s and 30s for most of the state, and highs even warmer Saturday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. We've seen waves and waves of moisture move up with the southerly flow coming all the way up from the subtropics and around Hawaii. You can also see what's left of that flow reaching over into the Bering Sea. So widespread IFR from the Bering Strait all the way down through the eastern chain in the Alaska Peninsula. And a new wave still working its way into Prince William Sound and the Chugach Range and the Kenai Mountains, especially the windward side. You see a big hole in that MVFR and IFR shield across Cook Inlet as the winds are downsloping and drying that out, and then a new round developing here across the Aleutian Range and the Alaska Range. Southeast, you're looking at hit and miss MVFR with IFR closer to Haines and Skagway and north of Gustavus up around Glacier Bay. Some of that should improve by the afternoon, but you're still dealing with hit and miss MVFR across the region for the day. IFR stretches in, kind of snakes in on that southerly flow, wrapping around low pressure centered up around Kodiak Island in the northern Gulf. And then we still have that persistent area of IFR across the Alaska Range and the Aleutian Range into Kodiak Island. We're still looking at IFR through the Bering Strait and off the Chukchi Coast down to St. Matthew, and the Pribilofs and MVFR should be fairly widespread across southwest. But you'll definitely see some improvement across inland areas as we start to get some warmer weather moving northward. Saturday morning, IFR is back from Etolan Strait all the way down to the Kuskokwim Delta and the Kilbucks. And also look around the Kenai Mountains again, all the way out into the eastern Gulf. IFR is fairly widespread. They're really hit and miss still on the MVFR across the inside passage. You'll probably see a better chance of VFR outside of Cross Sound and up toward Yakutat. And then marginal conditions on the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range with IFR widespread from St. Lawrence Island north through the Bering Strait and along the Chukchi Coast, and increasing areas of IFR across the western chain. That's moving eastward towards St. Paul and St. George by Saturday afternoon. Through the Bering Strait all the way down the Kuskokwim Delta and the Yukon Delta. Look for IFR there, generally east of Macquarie though. And widespread IFR across Prince William Sound through southern and central parts of Cook Inlet. On the other side though from Anchorage and Kenai and Soldotna. And then as you get toward Yakutat, you can see IFR conditions there. And some improvement south from Juneau, but you'll still be looking at MVFR conditions through some of the passes and still in the vicinity of the inside passage itself for Saturday afternoon. Here's your pass conditions in detail. For Friday, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions last most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, as you saw, probably hold at IFR and will probably push toward MVFR around Rainy Pass, but there is some suggestion that IFR will be in the area, so just keep that in mind. It will probably be marginal conditions most of the day. Windy Pass also looks to be mostly marginal, but there's some hints that it could go VFR by the end of the day, so hopefully some improvement there. A better chance for VFR in Isabel, but it may start out as marginal conditions early in the morning. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see VFR throughout the day and some hints of going toward MVFR for Tenedo Pass as well. But watch for some patchy areas of IFR in the morning. And then Portage Pass, IFR conditions most of the day. Chilkoot and White Pass may also lean over towards some improvement after an IFR start. Freezing levels indicate that the warmest air is shifting eastward, but you can still see levels around southeast from 4,000 to 6,000 feet and from 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the Yukon Delta and Valley all the way through Kodiak Island. South Central looking at levels between about 2,000 and 4,000 feet around some of the higher terrain. Those levels, of course, will be around 2,000 feet or lower. And the surface freezing line is all the way down toward Atka now and Nikolsky. So you can see it taking another dip south as those northerly winds start to kick in. But across southwest, levels are warming up. And you can see that taking over most of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Icing potential is there above 7 to and below 2,000 feet across the north slope north of the Brooks Range, and then 4,000 to 7,000 feet across the Bering, and generally 8,000 feet or above for most of the northern Gulf. Considerable moderate is what we're talking about there. The jet stream has a very elongated trough that's pushed its way through the Bering and drawing up subtropical moisture on that southerly flow across the Gulf, 75 to 100 knots, and then a fast-moving river of air leaving Alaska, heading for the lower 48 by way of Canada. At 9,000 feet, the southerly winds reaching 50 to 60 knots over the Gulf, 25 to 50 knots along the outer coast of southeast from the south and east itself, and 20 to 50 knots across the interior. Low pressures over Bristol Bay, slower winds here over the Bering, and then faster winds coming in from the north and west across the central chain. Low pressure is pretty much in the same spot there at 3,000 feet. A broad southeasterly flow sweeping through 20 to 55 knots tops. Same goes for southeast, the interior, and the northwest coast. And then northwesterlies come over the Aleutians anywhere from 35 to about 45 knots. So turbulence concerns are still there for the outer coast of southeast and the inside passage, south central, southwest, and especially over some of the higher terrain and in the lee side. Watch for mountain waves and chop below 5,000 feet. Some of that could be isolated severe, and also a lot of bumps in the north and west.
Colorful stars. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. It's embarrassing to admit, but Dean and I have favorite stars.
Who's embarrassed? It's true. Now, you may think we've been looking at the stars too long, but some stars, like James over there, just have character.
Stars vary in brightness, size, distance, and especially color.
When we think of stars, we immediately think they're all white. Not so. Stars come in all colors of the rainbow, from ruby red to tangerine,
from platinum blonde to deep blue.
And these distinct colors that you can see with the naked eye tell us a lot. Here, let's show you.
We have our skies set for any night this week after sunset facing southwest. There you'll find the constellation Orion the Hunter with his distinctive belt of 3 stars. If you look a little closer, you'll see stars of different brightness and color.
Star color is an indication of its temperature, blue stars being the hottest and red stars being the coolest. You can really see the colors of the brightest stars, like those in Orion. Most of his stars are blue, like the belt stars Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka.
And Orion's left foot, the star Rigel, is blue too.
But my favorite blue star is in Orion's shoulder, called Bellatrix. Bellatrix is one of the hottest stars at over 38,000 degrees. Through a telescope, Bellatrix is the deepest blue I've ever seen.
Bellatrix has a mysterious history. Its name means beautiful Amazon woman star. The star's influence was said to produce strong qualities in women and rendered those born under it lucky and loquacious. However, little else is known about the origins of this name.
But my question is, what is such a feminine star doing in Orion, the biggest, baddest macho man in the sky? Well, as tough as Orion is, I guess he's still in touch with his feminine side. Marking Orion's other shoulder is the star Betelgeuse. Actually, in most legends, Orion has his right arm raised up holding a club, and Betelgeuse marks his underarm. Betelgeuse roughly translates from ancient Arabic as armpit of the giant.
Not only does this star have a colorful name, but it also shines with a beautiful red glow. This color gives us a hint to its temperature. only about 5,800 degrees on its surface, much colder than blue Bellatrix.
The Native Americans of the Amazon River Valley link these two, Bellatrix and Betelgeuse, in a mythological story. They picture Bellatrix as a young boy swiftly paddling his canoe, while Old Man Betelgeuse is struggling to keep up.
But the brightest star in the night sky is the dog star Sirius over to the left of Orion. Sirius blazes with a stark white light in the south and a temperature of about 17,000 degrees.
Sirius is a tiny star compared to blue Bellatrix and is almost nothing next to behemoth Betelgeuse. The only reason Sirius is so bright is because it's so much closer to us, only 8.6 light years away, compared to over 240 light years to Bellatrix and 640 light years to Betelgeuse.
Capella is a bright star really high in the western sky this evening. Capella is similar to our sun in temperature, and so it should look about the same color, yellowish white. But Capella is much larger.
Plus, there's not just one star there, but 4 stars orbiting each other. Imagine all the sunsets and sunrises you could see from a planet in that system with 4 suns.
As a star, our sun falls right in the middle of the temperature spectrum, with a surface temperature of roughly 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun bathes us in the yellow-white glow that we all know and love.
I know that dimmer stars all appear white to our eyes, but if you look at these same dimmer stars through binoculars or a telescope, you'll see their individual colors more distinctly.
From red to blue, the hues are subtle, but once you train your eye to search out these variations of color, you may discover that you have favorite stars too. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And under marine weather now, starting with today's sea ice edge, we're still talking about a slow advance of this high concentration ice moving southward. Yesterday we were talking about 30 nautical miles. It probably won't go a whole lot further southward, as we do have another storm building out in the western Bering that will likely chew up that leading edge of ice. But there will be just a little more growth pushing southward toward St. Matthew, toward Nunivak Island, and filling in through Etoll Strait. You can see the high concentration ice is all the way up into the Chukchi coast right now. We do have a polynya that extends from Point Lay to Utqiagvik. As we get toward the end of the week and into the weekend, we are expecting a lot of wind to move from east to west across the Chukchi and over the Bering Strait. That may create additional polynyas there closer to the coastline as some of that ice might move away a little bit. For the very latest information, check weather.gov/Anchorage/ice, and more forecast information will be available tomorrow. As we look at southeast, notice very light north winds on the inside. Stevens Passage to the Lynn Canal, 10 knots and 2-foot seas there. Southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas. Southeast winds 25 to 35 up the outer coast. You're looking at about 16-foot seas there all the way from Dixon Entrance to Yakutat. That should improve as we get into Saturday dramatically. 14 to 15-foot seas there on a 25-knot wind. Winds remain generally light in Lynn Canal. That southerly flow. South and easterlies pick up a little bit more in Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. 20 knots there with a 4-foot sea. For Prince William Sound, a driving easterly wind, 30 knots and 7-foot seas will help to keep things really wet and conditions low across most of Kenai Fjords region and western Prince William Sound through the weekend. 17-foot seas outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance, an easterly flow coming in with 17 to 20 footers into the Barrens. 18-foot seas there on the western side with 40-knot winds, and northeast winds coming down Cook Inlet at 25 knots with an 8 to 9-foot sea on Friday. That diminishes and improves all the way around on Saturday. 15 to 20 knots there through Cook Inlet. Easterlies continue in Prince William Sound, but they come down as well, 20 to 25. 11 to 12-foot seas across the North and Western Gulf for Saturday. In Bristol Bay, a northeast wind, 30 knots, 6-foot seas there, 8-foot seas down the coast with a 25-knot wind. Look for winds to come in from the east and southeast around Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait with 14-foot seas, and more of a westerly flow coming across the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula. They're wrapping around low pressure that's sitting right over places like Perryville and Chignik through the weekend. As we get into Saturday, you can see that shifts just a little bit more. A southeast flow now inside of Bristol Bay with a 4-foot sea. Winds a little bit lighter around Kodiak Island, 3 to 10-foot seas on either side. And again, that trough of low pressure and low pressure system sitting right about here, right over Sandpoint, Perryville, and Chignik for Saturday. As we get into Friday in the Aleutians, driving north and westerly flows coming in, 35 to 40 knot winds here. Look for conditions to be low in this region for sure, 16 to 18 foot seas. The Pacific coast, 13 to 17 foot seas. In the west, it's going to have a little bit of a split flow as the ridge of high pressure is right about here. So you've got northwesterlies from Adak to Kiska and southeast winds coming into Shemya with that return flow in a 9-foot sea on Friday. And it all zips right back in from the west and southwest following another front moving into the central Bering. Look for south and westerly winds for the entire chain, anywhere from 25 to 30 knots in the east to 35 and 40 in the west, 18 to 21 foot seas building in on Saturday for the western part of the chain. For the west coast, northeast winds over the ice around Nome and Norton Sound, 20 knots there. North and easterly winds north of Nunivak Island to Savunga, 30 to 35 knots. You're looking at about 14-foot seas from St. Matthew to St. Paul and St. George. Again, watch for the winter weather advisory for tomorrow. And easterly offshore flow coming through the Kuskokwim Delta with 8-foot seas and 30-knot winds. That becomes a west and southwesterly wind ahead of the next wave of weather in the west. And southeasterly offshore flow building into the ice. So again, that's going to start that chewing up process we keep talking about. And for the north slope, driving easterly winds 25 to 30, east and northeast winds over the Chukchi coast 25 to 35 there on Friday. Watch for blizzard conditions. The northern Arctic coast looking at a winter weather advisory, not as bad there for your Friday and Saturday. Easterlies across the ice, 30 knots and up to 40 in fact around Kaktovik. East and southeasterly winds building off of Point Lay, Point Hope and Kivalina for your Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, a lot of rain, a lot of snow for some of the higher terrain in south central Alaska. Mind the avalanche conditions. There will be increased avalanche danger as we go through the weekend. A period of heavier rainfall will sit out over the coast, just kind of grazing parts of southeast at times with a little bit of rain, not the big stuff that's moving into Prince William Sound. Up north, it is wind and snow. It looks like the windiest and snowiest places will be around the Bering Strait with winter weather advisories there, but blizzard conditions for ground blizzards will be found across the north slope all the way through the weekend there. Plan for that to get better as we get toward the end of your Saturday with another wave of weather moving across the Bering and starting to chew up the ice once again. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.